These are the mesmerizing eyes that have left an indelible mark upon my soul. Meet Orlando, the title character of Sally Potter's 1992 film adaptation of the eponymous novel by Virginia Woolf. And the deeply transformative, life-changing effect it had on me is the topic of today's video. Join me in this very personal exploration of Orlando. In the movie, as well as the novel, we follow Orlando, an English nobleman who starts out in the 16th century, stops aging for unspecified reasons, and lives until the present day. Throughout the centuries, Orlando has to tackle such major themes as love, death, society, and identity. About halfway through his journey, Orlando changes his gender and becomes a woman. Both the film as well as the novel very much play with gender roles, and especially in the novel we have several supporting characters who seem to be just as gender fluid and time-traversing as Orlando. The reasons for both the longevity and the transformation of the character never get explained. In the novel, Woolf speculates that maybe Orlando had been a woman all along, or that he may have remained a man and just decided to take on a feminine appearance. In the movie, it is heavily implied that it is Queen Elizabeth I who puts a spell on Orlando because she is so smitten with his youthful beauty that she wishes him to remain that way for all eternity. But quite frankly, the reason for his eternal youth or for the sex change is of little consequence. We don't really need to know why exactly, and I really prefer not knowing because it adds to the mystery and the charm of the story. But to avoid any confusion regarding Orlando's gender, I will use the personal pronoun they from here on out. Before talking about the movie, let's have a quick look at the literary origins of the character. The English writer Virginia Woolf wrote the novel in 1928, and the real-life inspiration for Orlando was Woolf's close friend and sapphic lover Vita Sackville-West. Vita came from an old aristocratic family, and Woolf drew not only on her personal life and her family's history, but also used Knowle, the stately country house Vita grew up in, as a model for Orlando's ancestral home. And in the novel, the house becomes almost a character in its own right, embodying memory, lineage, and the passage of time. I myself have been to Knowle several times, as well as to Hatfield House, which was the stand-in for Orlando's ancestral home in the movie. Both Knowle and Hatfield are among my favorite English country houses, and if you ever happen to be in the area, I can definitely recommend visiting them. Woolf intended the novel as a playful experiment that blends biography, fantasy, and satire of traditional literary forms. It was supposed to be a mock biography, parodying conventional historical narratives. Woolf wrote Orlando both as a tribute to her friend Vita Sackville-West and as a creative way to examine gender fluidity, history, and the nature of selfhood. Now, of course, there would be much more to say about Woolf's intentions in writing the book, as well as her relationship to Vita, but that's not the subject of today's video. As with all adaptations, there are several key differences between the novel and the movie. For example, in the novel, after becoming a woman, Orlando has a son and is therefore able to keep her ancestral home. This was intended by Woolf as a kind of tribute to Vita Sacra West, because being a woman and having no male heirs, Vita was unable to inherit Noel. So if Vita was unable to keep the house in real life, then at least her fictional counterpart would be able to do so. But in the movie, Orlando has a daughter and therefore loses her home. I guess this was intended as an updated feminist version of the story. By giving up her old home, she is, so to speak, shedding her old identity and is freed from the heavy weight of the past. A sort of liberation from social conventions and the opportunity for a fresh start. And I get that. That's a very legitimate message. But personally, I must say that I was always very saddened by the fact that she loses her ancestral home at the end of the movie. I must admit I'm very biased in this respect because of my strong love for old historic buildings, especially English country houses and mansions and castles of all kinds. Just because I would really love to live in one of those places, and I love the fact that these places have been grown organically over so many centuries and have seen so many generations come and go. I love the sense of being part of an old family and living in such a beautiful old place that has been in the possession of your family for so many generations. Just like Vita Sacra West loved her ancestral home very deeply for exactly these reasons. Noel was not just an old dusty pile of stones to her. It was a beautiful piece of art. It was living history. It was a connection to the past, to past centuries and past generations. It was a living, breathing being, almost like a family member. And that's exactly the way Virginia Woolf treated it in her novel. The house is a character in itself, and over the centuries, it changes alongside Orlando. It is deeply linked to Orlando's personal journey, Orlando's development and transformation. And yet, despite all the changes, it fundamentally stays the same, just like Orlando. And in my view, this is a beautiful metaphor. And it also plays into the theme of identity and how Orlando repeatedly searches for his or her identity, and how the places we live in and grow up in, can be part of our identity as well. If you reduce Orlando's struggle with identity or the overarching themes of identity and finding oneself to nothing more than just a question of gender, then I think you do the story of Orlando a stark disservice. You're missing key elements. Orlando's house and Orlando's social standing and their self-definitions and the spirit of the age in which they live and the culture they live in. All of that is very important too when it comes to identity and self-definition. Now let's move on to the movie. First of all, I want to stress how gorgeous the movie is visually. The cinematography, the sets, the costumes, especially the costumes. It's all absolutely gorgeous to look at. And Sally Potter has done a great job of condensing the novel and adapting it for the screen. Granted, some might be put off by the rather unconventional storytelling, but the atmosphere, the mood, the feeling of a movie or a picture or any piece of art often means more to me than the actual content. Because what good is a movie, no matter how clever the plot, if the way it is shot and presented, if the cinematography and the characters don't speak to me, if I don't feel drawn in by the aesthetic? It has to touch me, speak to me on a personal level. And only very seldomly do I come across a movie with such well-written characters that I can look past aesthetics and not care so much about the feeling and the mood. Usually, these are the most important things to me. And I mean, it's not like the character doesn't have an arc. In the end, Orlando is able to let go of the past, and they have successfully freed themselves from all the social rules and conventions of which they have been a victim for the past 400 years. They are no longer a victim. They no longer doubt themselves. They have found their own identity, and they live their own life. If there's one complaint that I have, and it's not even a complaint, it's more of a lament, it's the runtime. The movie is way too short for my taste, and if it were up to me, I would make it at least twice as long, or even better, I would make a whole series out of it. Especially in the second half of the movie, things go very fast, and the closer we get to the present, the more time accelerates and it feels quite rushed, unfortunately. I mean, we spent quite a fair amount of time in the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th century, but only very little time in the 18th and 19th century, and we only get a very short segment, not longer than a minute or so, where we see Orlando stumbling over a battlefield in the First World War. But I am aware that it was quite a struggle to get the movie made and to find people who were willing to finance it. So, yeah, we are actually quite lucky that the movie exists at all and that we have what we have. And what we have is marvelous. This movie has such a special atmosphere. It is, for the lack of a better word, magical. It is equally quirky and melancholic. It's self-aware and tongue-in-cheek and quite playful, but at the same time there's also something deeper. There is this pregnant stillness. It's like a painting from one of the old masters. There is this colorful lightheartedness in the foreground, and simultaneously there are heavy shadows in the background. But not scary shadows, more like heavy drapes that hide a profound sadness, an existential pain in the character of Orlando, and an incurable heartache. At least that's what I am seeing when I look into Orlando's eyes. A heaviness, an emotional weight, and sometimes an expression that reminds me of an anxious wounded deer. The strange magic and enchanted mood of the film can also be attributed, I think, to the wondrous interplay between the dreamy, airy, sometimes even ghostly seeming music and the thick, elegiac quietude that permeates the whole movie from start to finish. Many scenes are rather quiet, with not much dialogue or action. There is not much movement, and the characters mostly carry themselves in a calm and contemplative manner. Some might be put off by this, but I adore it. I love that kind of serene, graceful beauty. And I think that in that silence, that stillness, that quiet, almost meditative atmosphere, the pictures become much more powerful and achieve far greater impact, especially Tilda Swinton's haunting facial expressions in the close-ups. Against the backdrop of this profound silence, Orlando's inner life and emotions emerge with far greater intensity. Now, I don't want to analyze the movie scene by scene and tell you the whole plot or discuss every little detail, because you can watch the movie or read the novel by yourself. And I would very much encourage you to do so. Instead, I want to concentrate mainly on the opening scene, because for me it's the most significant one. Not only on a personal level, but also in terms of describing Orlando's personality. Even before the first scene opens, we get this dreamy piece of music in the opening credits, which always gives me chills when I hear it. It perfectly fits the overall mood and tone of the movie. It sounds enchanted, like it's straight out of a fairy tale. As if it were a tune played by some pixie in an enchanted forest. It makes me think of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, for example. And the airy, echo-like quality of the sound makes me feel like I am right in the middle of the stream of time. Like I'm hearing faraway sounds from distant times and distant lands. And then the movie opens and the music fades into the background, but still lingers on like an undercurrent, floating beneath the whole scenery like a stream that runs beneath the surface. And right from the beginning there is this melancholic mood that softly hangs over everything like a thin veil, like tender wings embracing me. I feel their weight, but it's light and gentle and soft. And I love it. I love the melancholic atmosphere of this movie so very deeply because it perfectly mirrors my own fundamental feeling. Others who view this movie may not see it that way. Their impression may be totally different, and they might not perceive the movie as melancholic at all. And that's fine. But I do, and I feel right at home in it. In fact, when I saw the movie for the first time, this was also the first time for me that I fully got to know this side of me. It's like my eggshell cracked and the innermost core of my being, my true essence, came to the surface. I didn't know I had it in me. This love, this tenderness, and this melancholic feeling that, since then, has stayed with me and has become my best friend. And I've identified with it so much that it has become my truth, my true self. Whenever I try to find myself again and ask myself who I really am, I always return to this melancholic, tender feeling. And it is very important for me to emphasize this special blend, because this feeling is not just a kind of drooping moodiness or despondency. No, in this melancholy lies a deep tenderness and sensitivity and beauty for me. And maybe now you can see why I called my channel Melanestica, and why I invented this concept of melanestheticism, because this mixture of melancholy and aesthetics, of beauty and pensiveness, is a reflection of my own nature. So back to the opening scene. As I said, the music withdraws but still lingers on like an undercurrent, and we encounter Orlando, busy practicing a poem which they are supposed to perform for Queen Elizabeth I, who is expected to arrive at their father's home. And right away we are entranced by the soft-spoken, melodic voice of Tilda Swinton, who is acting as the narrator of the movie, and she is also playing Orlando. After pacing up and down for a short while, Orlando takes a seat under their favorite oak tree. In the movie, the tree only makes a very brief and rather insignificant appearance in the first and last scene. In the novel, it is of greater significance, because Orlando is working on a poem called The Oak Tree, and they are only able to finish it by the end of the book. So for over 400 years, Orlando keeps modifying the poem and keeps changing with it over time, which I find a rather beautiful symbolic image. And then we get a close-up of Orlando. It doesn't last very long, only about 20 seconds. But it's in these 20 seconds that the whole of Orlando's character gets revealed and encapsulated most beautifully. Tilda Swinton manages to say so much with just a few looks. There is so much depth and expression in them. First, she looks into the distance, with a subtle smile around the lips. And there is so much I can see in this expression. I see a gentle young soul who opens their heart to the world, who wants to give themselves to the world, who wants to be carried away by fancy and passion, who wants to love and be loved, who has ambition and wants to become a great poet, a writer, who wants to pour all their soul and passion and feeling onto the paper, who wants to find a way to express themselves. And they have this expectant eagerness in their eyes. They want adventure. They want to see distant lands. They want romance. They want the whole experience of human existence. They want beauty and poetry and appreciate this beauty and live for it. They look longingly into the distance and expect so much from life. The world is beckoning them. They are so young, so pure, like an unplucked rose petal. And at the same time, there is such a deep sensitivity and fragility in Orlando's expression. And insecurity as well. The way they bat their eyelashes reveals a kind of shy awkwardness. Their heart is overwhelming with strong, tender feelings. But they are anxious and introverted, and they have problems expressing themselves. And yet, at the same time, there's also a calmness about them. They radiate a miraculous serenity and mysteriousness, almost like a sorcerer, but a gentle and kind one. The sort who is wise but silent, who doesn't talk very much. Orlando is a deep well. There is such a beautiful, serene silence at the bottom, with pristine, sparkling waters. And you don't know how deep it goes, how deep the well, how deep the waters are. But they seem straight from heaven somehow, as if Semele, the moon goddess, had cried all of her beautiful tears into this well and filled it with her divine purity. On the one hand, there is this moving, unspeakable shyness, tenderness, and sensitivity, this fragility and insecurity in Orlando. And on the other hand, there is this divine mystery, this unfathomable magic, this poetic fire and titanic energy. And it's all in this one look. But it's not just one look. Every second, their expression slightly changes. It modulates. It shows new facets, new properties. I probably read far too much into this. But you see, it's not just Orlando I see before me. I see myself. I identify with Orlando very strongly, and looking into their eyes is like looking into my own heart. After this first dreamy look into the distance, Orlando turns to the camera and addresses the viewer directly, like in an intimate conversation. And I really love the way this movie keeps breaking the fourth wall. At several points in the movie, Orlando looks at the viewer in response to what's happening at that particular moment. As if they want to tell us, look at this, what do you think about that? Can you believe it? A few times, Tilda Swinton looks at the camera with this look on her face that seems to say, seriously? Like, for example, in this scene, when Orlando meets their love interest, Shelmardine. It's really quite funny and charming. Back to the opening scene. Orlando turns to the camera, corrects the narrator, and then hastily looks away again. And again, the mimic art of Tilda Swinton is just perfection. How quickly and a bit awkwardly she averts her gaze. It shows Orlando's shyness. And even though they correct the narrator in a very determined manner, because the impulse felt right, it seems like they are a bit taken aback or surprised by their own audacity, and so they try to gloss over it by just keeping on staring into the distance. After that, Orlando takes their quill and paper, and it seems like they're about to write a few lines of poetry. But suddenly they stop, and the camera cuts to another close-up, and Orlando has this wistful, melancholic expression on their face. Why? Again, I can only give my own interpretation. It seems as though, in the midst of their train of thought, in the midst of life itself, they suddenly pause, as if to reconsider their actions and reflect upon them. As if, in the very flow of life, bold and beautifully surging, they are all at once overcome by their own innate melancholic tendency, as though life itself has broken off in that instant, as though everything has suddenly lost its meaning and substance, as though they have become aware of a deeper tragedy and groundlessness at the core of existence. To me, it seems as if Orlando is saying, what am I doing here? What is this? What is the point of all this? What is the point of life itself? And at the same time, where is the love and the meaning I long for? Will I ever find fulfillment? And why must there always be gray clouds darkening my bright blue sky? Why can I not shake this feeling of melancholy? And what is the purpose of this existence? Which path, which goal am I to pursue? Where does my destiny lie? Who am I? Who do I want to be? Who can I be? And what can the world, what can life mean to me? I feel utterly lonely. I feel lost in existence. And this black ink blot on the paper before me looks like a dark hole, sucking me in. This brooding, melancholic side of Orlando is another very important characteristic. One that's already prominent in the novel, and given beautiful expression in several scenes in the movie, most prominently in the scene with another of Orlando's love interests, the Russian princess Sasha, where we see how in the midst of happiness, Orlando very acutely feels the piercing polarity of life wash over them, and they say, nothing thicker than a knife's blade separates happiness from melancholy. And this concludes the characterization. Orlando is a poet, an aesthete, a dreamer, a romantic, an introvert, a sensitive soul, full of passion and longing and lust for life and for love, but also with a deep-seated, melancholic and wistful streak, and a tendency towards brooding, reflection, and introspection. Orlando is a poet and a philosopher. Orlando is a beautiful soul who is trying to find themselves, trying to find their place in the world. And for me, the sex change is just one of many aspects, one of many instances that illustrate this deep-seated insecurity, this search for identity and for meaning, this feeling of being lost in existence and not knowing who one is and where one belongs. The sex change never played a huge role for me, because, as Orlando says in the movie, after the transformation has taken place, same person, no difference at all, just a different sex. And I really prefer to see Orlando as androgynous, as an androgynous angelic creature with an unspecific gender. For me, Orlando is both, man and woman, and neither. Orlando can be whatever they want, whatever they choose to be. And they don't have to be anything. They are just Orlando. They are a beautiful soul. They are beyond petty human definitions. For me, they are beyond human, even. For as I said, I regard them as a kind of angelic, ethereal being. But that's of course just me and my personal interpretation. And of course, Tilda Swinton's peerless beauty is an important factor in this as well. Orlando would definitely not have had the same effect on me with someone else in the role. It was Tilda Swinton who breathed life into this character. She personified him and her perfectly, with her highly androgynous and otherworldly appearance. Only she had the right amount of sensibility, intelligence, artistic understanding, and also that wonderful quirky streak. And her eyes, her large, strikingly beautiful, soulful eyes, like an alien or some sort of celestial, supernatural being that descended from another realm, that got stranded somehow in this vile world of ape-like brutes. Orlando is the personification of love and beauty, like a messenger from the gods, unfit for the harsh uncouthness of the world. And in Tilda Swinton, they have found their perfect earthly human form. And I will never forget that first time I laid eyes on them. In retrospect, it was a golden time, even though it certainly didn't feel that way back then, because I was too much consumed by my own heartache and teenage angst. I was only 14 or maybe 15, utterly stuck in the depths of puberty, and I was totally unprepared for what I was about to see. When I first saw Tilda as Orlando in that opening scene, I was awestruck. Who was that heavenly creature that was looking back at me? In those first few moments, I genuinely didn't know whether I was facing a man or a woman. I was perplexed, confused. I was struck by lightning. For me, it really was something of a divine revelation. Stephen Fry, the English actor and writer and comedian, once said about the cataclysmic experience of first love, "It is like an atom bomb. All the energy of who you are and who you want to be and what you love and what you hope to be explodes." And that's exactly how I felt in that moment. The film reflected my own state of mind with remarkable precision, and, in a certain sense, made me consciously aware of it for the very first time. I became aware of something essential within my being, a deeply intrinsic mood or sensibility that defines who I am. It hit just the right chords within me. And it's so fascinating because I fell in love with Orlando, and at the same time I identified with them. I fell in love with the female Orlando, but I identified with male Orlando. Orlando represents everything I am and everything I want to be, everything I hold dear. Orlando represents the best version of myself, the ideal version. And there were and are several significant parallels between me and Orlando. Like Orlando, I was, and still am, a sensitive, melancholic romantic who loves literature and poetry. And like Orlando in the first half of the movie, I was lovesick at the time when I first saw the movie, and like Orlando, who went abroad in order to forget their love and to leave their past behind, I tried to do the same. I left my home country and went to Great Britain for several years, hoping for a fresh start. I went to Great Britain not just because I loved the British Isles with their rich history and culture and the art and literature, the beautiful architecture and the countryside, but also because it was Orlando's country. I wanted to live in Orlando's world as much as possible. Unfortunately, I got disillusioned quite soon with modern Britain, and I had to realize that everyday existence is just as drab and ugly and depressing in today's Britain as it is in the rest of the world. But even so, even though it couldn't hold up in reality, I was able to preserve my ideal, and I still carry it within my heart. And there is more. Throughout their journey, Orlando is not just trying to find themselves, but they are also looking for love and company and understanding and a place to belong. For centuries, they are searching. They only sought love and appreciation and freedom, the freedom to be their true, authentic self. Yet repeatedly, they met with disappointment. They are the alien who cannot find kindred spirits, who searches for others like themselves but cannot find them, who always remains awkward, different somehow, and detached from the world. A dreamer and an idealist, out of step with reality. All of this spoke very deeply to me. But remember, I want to stress again that I am only sharing with you my own understanding and interpretation of the character. Yours might differ, and that's fine. And it's not just that I identified with the character. Orlando has had an important influence on me in many other ways too. My Orlando experience is a bit like my personal creation myth. As though this encounter with Orlando were the trunk from which the many wild and far-reaching branches of my identity have grown. I mean, of course, there were other influences as well, and of course, there are other factors in my development to consider too. And yes, to be fair, I had already been interested in Great Britain and in British history before that. And I had long been drawn to art and literature, for example. History has fascinated me since childhood, and I've always had my own particular way of relating to it, being deeply receptive to the mood and the atmosphere of historical places and objects. But Orlando elevated all of that to an entirely new level. This movie deepened my love and appreciation for the beauty of past centuries. Both the atmosphere of the film and its visual beauty, its aesthetic sensibility, completely captivated me. And my whole concept of melanestheticism, this personal concept that I came up with, which also inspired the name of my YouTube channel, can ultimately be traced back to Orlando. And I've already tried to explain in another video what exactly I mean by that term, and if you're interested to learn more about that, you can find the link to this video either in the description below, or you can click on the link that is popping up in the right-hand corner of the screen now. In many ways, this special melanistic sentiment of mine has its origin in Orlando. It was the first work, the first piece of art to evoke that feeling within me in such a fully developed form. I might even go as far as saying that Orlando is the embodiment of it, its very definition. When I think of the melanistic, I think, among other things, of Orlando. And another thing that has always held a particular allure for me is characters who live for many centuries, and stories that span across multiple centuries and layers of time. Vampires are, of course, a classical example for this sort of thing. That's also why I love movies like, for example, Jim Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive, which, fun fact, also happens to star Tilda Swinton, who once again plays a character who is many centuries old. I am fascinated by the passing of time, by the idea of living through many ages, witnessing all that change, looking back over the unfolding of millennia, and remembering all the people and events that have vanished into the past. There is something deeply tragic and at the same time deeply romantic about imagining an ancient vampire like, for example, Nosferatu, who has wandered the earth for millennia, yet sits completely alone in his old castle, living in the shadows, watching the days pass by, slowly withering like an antique, like a relic from a long-forgotten age, feeling out of time and like an outcast, like being cast out of history itself. The world around him changes while he himself remains the same. He gathers cobwebs, just like the dark corners of the vast empty hall in which he sits. I'm not quite sure why, but I love that aesthetic. But this is taking us completely away from Orlando now. In Orlando's case, it is entirely different, of course. Orlando is the embodiment of vitality. They are like an eternally flowing fountain of youth that continually renews and recreates itself. And yet there is this paradox. Orlando transforms and adapts to the fashions of each era and moves along with historical change, continually reimagining and redefining themselves, but at the same time, fundamentally, they remain the same person. It's like different blossoms emerging, but the trunk remaining the same. In my mind, to love Orlando is to love what is most noble and sublime in human nature. It means loving the best that both the male and the female have to offer. Orlando is like a harmonious combination of the best of both principles. And perhaps the greatest miracle of them all, through Orlando, I learned to love myself. Through Orlando, I become aware of my own inner beauty. I get in touch with the noblest part of my own nature. I get a glimpse of the ideal self that lies latent within me. There is a quote by the German novelist Bettina von Arnim where she says, "Whenever a higher vision of human nature fills your mind, do not doubt that it is the true one. For all are born for the ideal, and wherever you sense it, you may also bring it to life within a person, for they surely possess the potential for it." And that's what Orlando does for me. That's the effect they have on me. They are like a guiding light. They hold a candle to my own soul and illuminate it and make it shine in its brightest colors. Again, I want to re-emphasize that this is a very personal interpretation of Orlando, of the movie as well as the novel. I know, for example, that some people like to turn Orlando into a queer transgender fashion icon. But that's not my Orlando. To me, these interpretations lack gravitas and sensitivity. For me, Orlando is not someone who parades around and flaunts their androgyny or turns it into a kind of performance. My Orlando has no interest in self-display or in becoming a mouthpiece for whatever political agenda. My Orlando is a simple and gentle soul whose ethereal beauty expresses itself through their calm and quiet way of being. I could continue talking about Orlando forever, I think, and discuss all my favorite scenes of the movie. Like, for example, that beautiful, emotionally charged sequence when Orlando runs through a maze and we get a fluent and very clever transition from the 18th to 19th century. And Orlando exits the maze and runs over an open field, and this fiercely romantic music is playing, and they throw themselves onto the ground and embrace the earth beneath them and say, "Nature, nature, I am your bride. Take me." Every time I see Tilda Swinton running over that field in her gorgeous Victorian dress and this piece of music is playing, something wells up inside of me. In that moment, I am fully with the character and fully in the moment, and I can palpably feel the emotional intensity and the turmoil inside of Orlando. Their feeling of being lost in time as well as space, almost as if they were trapped in some sort of intermediate world, between the centuries, between wherever and whatever. Being lonely, being lost, being full of passion and longing for company and love and for the ability to freely be who you want to be. Just be yourself, without being constantly hassled by your fellow human beings, just because you don't fit the silly pre-established social and cultural norms. And there are several other scenes which I could most willingly delve into. So many more scenes rich with emotional flavor, so precious and so dear to me. But I don't intend to stretch the runtime of this already quite long video any further. And I haven't even properly talked about the novel yet, or about its author, Virginia Woolf, and what she and her work means to me. That would fill a whole video in itself. And indeed, I am planning on doing just that, because Virginia Woolf definitely deserves a video of her own. But that's a topic for another time. If you liked the video, if it spoke to you on some level and resonated with you, then I can only encourage you to watch the movie and read the novel for yourself. And if you know the movie or the novel already and love it just as much as I do, in your own personal way of course, then please feel free to write about it in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you like the video and like what I do, then please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time I say, good night out there, whoever, whatever, and wherever you may be. Bye bye.